We want to bring in former San Bernardino police chief and ABC News contributor Jared Bergwan, who joins me now. And Jared, this is not the first time that you have joined me in the wake of a mass shooting, and so we know that you are familiar with the horrors here, and frankly, America is very familiar with it too. This one, given its unique circumstances, it's happening in a crowded event. All of these people there for the 4th of July, and now, according to investigators, it happened with the shooter up on a roof. What does that mean for police protocol and police response?
Yeah, so this is in many ways just a horrible nightmare for the police officers that are planning these events. Anytime you have a special event, a parade, a large gathering in a community, whatever it is, the police are involved in the planning of that. And when they get involved, they build an entire plan around how they're going to deploy and where people are going to be and what's going to happen in the case of an emergency. Unfortunately, when you do those, as Josh was mentioning, we've got this evolution of things that are happening. You are in the back of your mind thinking about every different scenario that can take place. You're thinking about a car that can ram through the barriers. You're thinking about a shooter. You're thinking about somebody with a high ground advantage. You're thinking about bombs like what happened in Boston. You've got all of those things that you've got to try to plan for. And in the midst of that, you got to try to make it a reasonably normal, safe event where people don't feel like they're living in a military zone. So that's challenging. The response to something like this is going to be very similar to an active shooter in the sense that as an officer, you're going to go towards the sound of gunfire. That can be very challenging in an urban environment because the sound's echoing off the building. It can be hard to try to figure out where exactly those rounds are coming from, but they're going to go towards the sound. The difference is from like a normal active shooter that we've talked about so many times where somebody's in a room conducting an attack is now you've got somebody with an advantage of the high ground, and you've got to figure out how do you gain the advantage? How do you take that advantage away? How do you protect people on the ground? And so you're going to shift to two mindsets. One, how do you get access to the shooter? How do you figure out a way to neutralize him if it's still going on? And how do you shelter and shield victims that are potentially in his line of fire and get them out of there? Very, very difficult to do.
Understandably so. I mean, we see all the videos of the people who were there who are terrified and trying to shelter in place. How complicated is it, and what specifically are authorities looking for when you have an active shooter? As we know, according to authorities, this shooter was able to hide in all of the crowds. What are police looking for when you still have a suspect or a shooter, and also you're trying to get people to safety, and there's all that chaos happening at the same time?
Yeah, in the midst of chaos, that's something that we talk about a lot when we're training. When you do active shooter training and you are extracting people out of a location, you're trying to be careful as to ensure that the suspect is not blending in with those people that are leaving. The difference is that the people that you were trying to get out of the area in this case didn't even know who the suspect was. It's likely that nobody even saw him or potentially saw him on the roof carrying out the attack. So nobody even knew exactly what they were looking for. Almost impossible, to be honest with you.
I know you touched on this a little bit in your first answer, Jared, but I would imagine that the way that authorities prepare before these events has evolved a lot over the past 20 years with what we've seen and how now frequently these incidents happen, to where I'm sure in the 1990s, you know, there was a plan in the event of the worst, but it wasn't really top of mind. When now police are planning around a happy event like this, is step one, what do we do in the event of an active shooter?
Yeah, there's almost always a part of that plan that's going to have all of the contingency pieces. And you're going to brief that to the entire team, the specialized team of folks that are called to work that event. And in that, the contingency plans are going to be, what do we do if something goes wrong? So what is the primary medical center that's going to be used? What is going to be the plan of action if something chaotic happens? What is going to be the rendezvous point for officers to move to in the event they need to muster and move in as a unit? All of those things are taken into account. They're built into the planning of every single event. And you are exactly right. 25, 30 years ago, when we had a parade, we used to make sure that the road was closed so that somebody didn't accidentally drive down the road and into the the folks that were enjoying the parade. Far more involved now in terms of what you're putting together and what you're planning.
That is the current state of America. And Jared, I mean, how you handle the active scene is one thing. Once it's done with and you can assess the damage, you have a suspect in custody, what are the next steps with law enforcement?
Yeah, so in the midst of all this, you're obviously going to have an extraordinarily complicated and detailed investigation, if you will. And it's even compounded by the fact that the suspect is still alive in this. You will have your day in court. You have to put together a rock solid case to show that this person did it, what their intent was, present all the evidence. But as part of that, you've got to protect all of the evidence. And that's pretty hard to do in such a chaotic event. How do you isolate the evidence? How do you get things aside? How do you make sure that it's not contaminated? How do you get all the information, all the video, all the witness statements? Very, very complicated investigation. In addition to that, it's complicated by virtue of the size of it too. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people have to be interviewed. But then you've got the second component of it, and that's the recovery piece. How do you support your community? And law enforcement agencies are realizing that in many ways, even though public health and other elements of government and the faith-based community are going to come in and they're going to start that healing process, law enforcement, we have found that we are at the very front side of that healing process as well, and we've got to be involved in that piece.
All right, Jared Burguan, thanks so much for your time.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.